This is what Germany, the country with the largest economy in the European Union, looks like today. After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Germany became the largest donor to Ukraine in Europe and will be the flagship of its post-war recovery. The bombing of Dresden in February 1945 made an indelible impression on the American writer Kurt Vonnegut, who took part in the rubble removal. Not only he, but also many other witnesses to the fall of the Reich were convinced that the country would not recover from its war wounds for a long time. On 8 May 1945, Nazi Germany signed the surrender. According to the historian Rüdiger Overmans, the number of dead German soldiers was more than 5.3 million. The Second World War was costly for Germany. About $270 billion was spent on the war effort at the 1945 exchange rate, and the country paid more than 70 billion in reparations at the current exchange rate. In 1949, the country was divided into the German Democratic Republic, GDR, which became part of the Socialist Bloc, and Germany, which remained under Western patronage. Divided Germany became the epicenter of the confrontation between two ideologies. The model of the Socialist GDR proved to be a failure, while the Federal Republic of Germany, on the contrary, became the backbone of modern Germany and the European Union. The reforms in Germany were based on the Marshall Plan and the reforms of the German government. The Marshall Plan was to restore Europe's economy, reduce trade barriers, modernize industry, introduce modern business management, and oust communists from power structures. The transformation of Western Europe into a political, economic, and military foothold for the United States was also due to the growing confrontation with the USSR and the approach of the Cold War. The beginning of West Germany's economic growth was Erhard's financial reform, during which the Deutschmark was introduced, ending inflation. This was followed by the abolition of state planning and the launch of a market economy. This turned Germany into one of the most developed countries in Europe by the mid-1950s. Speaking of modern Germany, it is worth knowing that it was one of the initiators of the European Union long before the fall of the Berlin Wall. The first step was the European Coal and Steel Community Treaty of 1951. Modern Germany is the main financial powerhouse of Europe, accounting for more than 3% of global GDP. As we can see, war and destruction are not a sentence for the country. It is a challenge for the government and society to build a better world. Modern Great Britain is a consistent partner of Ukraine, becoming the first European country to supply Ukraine with lethal weapons and ranking third in support after the USA and Germany. During the Second World War, Great Britain was under constant bombardment and shelling by ballistic and cruise, Vive 1 and V2 missiles. The scale of destruction was catastrophic. Only during the Blitz operation, the bombing of Great Britain by Nazi Germany's Air Force from 7th September 1940 to 10th May 1941, approximately 41,000 people lost their lives. About half of them were residents of London. Coventry was almost completely destroyed. This ancient city was a center of the automotive industry. Belfast, Birmingham, Bristol, Cardiff, Liverpool, Manchester, Portsmouth, Plymouth, and many other cities were also attacked. The bombing aimed to destroy British industry and undermine the morale of the population, pushing Britain out of the war. Britain might not have survived without the substantial help of the United States. During the war, essential materials, weapons, and food were supplied. However, the end of the war marked the beginning of repayments on foreign debt. The renowned economist and advisor to the post-war British government, John Maynard Keynes, warned that these repayments, along with continued extraordinary defense expenditures, could lead to a financial Dunkirk, a catastrophe. The post-war loan from the USA only postponed economic problems without solving them. The Marshall Plan, officially the European Recovery Program, provided the solution. Great Britain became the largest recipient of assistance under the Marshall Plan. By the end of 1947, the American low-interest, long-term dollar loan was largely spent. But at the beginning of 1948, the Marshall Plan commenced, amounting to $13.3 billion. As of 2024, this equates to $173.8 billion. Between 1948 and 1951, Great Britain received $2.7 billion in grants under the Marshall Plan, making it the largest recipient of aid from the plan. Economic recovery began slowly amid post-war housing shortages and bread rationing. American loans and Marshall Plan grants kept the economy afloat. The dissolution of the empire also aided recovery. India, Pakistan, Burma, and Ceylon gained independence. Britain was one of the founding members of NATO in 1949. The return of conservative Winston Churchill as Prime Minister accelerated the recovery. By the end of 1952, Britain became the world's third nuclear power. London remains the financial center of the world and a key NATO participant. This demonstrates that war is not a sentence when it is a defense against an aggressor. However, recovery requires significant effort and a steadfast commitment to democracy. Romania is a member of NATO and the EU. It is a country that is working hard to develop modern sectors of the economy. This is evidenced by the presence of research centers of the world's leading aircraft, electronics, and computer technology corporations in Bucharest. Romania is actively supporting Ukraine in its response to Russian aggression. It helps to produce weapons, train soldiers, and has provided Ukraine with the Patriot air defense system. Romania has also helped organize sea and land transport corridors for Ukrainian exports. Since 1941, Romania had been at war against the Soviet Union. But in August 1944, Bucharest joined the Allies. This allowed Romania to minimize the destruction. But from 1944 to the end of the 1950s, Romania remained under military occupation and economic control of the Soviet Union. In fact, the Soviet Union imposed reparations on the country during this time. Collectivization was carried out in Romania, i.e., the confiscation of peasants' property in favor of collective state farms. In the 1950s, the communist regime tried to accelerate industrialization by policy, investing in electricity, metallurgy, mechanical engineering, and the chemical industry. But this did not benefit the population. Since 1965, when the autocratic leader Nicolae Ceausescu came to power in Romania, the economy has improved. This is because Ceausescu tried to move the country in a somewhat independent way. Ceausescu's regime caused popular discontent and created a huge foreign debt that reached $12 billion in the late 1970s. In the 1980s, Ceausescu introduced the so-called austerity regime, which allowed him to pay off the debt, but severely hit the interests of the population. This ended in an uprising and Ceausescu's execution in late 1989. The state of the economy remained extremely difficult. After Ceausescu's overthrow, Romania underwent privatization and market transformation. In 1992, Romania signed an association agreement with the EU. Official accession to the EU took place in 2007. The country's further development was significantly supported by EU programs, including infrastructure development. Romania is considered to be the next center for technology startups in the EU. Its digital infrastructure, according to available rankings, is ahead of other Central European countries. Romania's example shows that neither war nor long-standing communist dictatorship can be a hindrance to a transition to a market economy with effective support from its European Union neighbors. With its growth rate, the country is now claiming the status of a European economic tiger. Vietnam is considered one of the most dynamic economies in the world. Despite being under communist rule, the country operates a market economy. Vietnam follows a pragmatic approach, avoiding too close ties with China, India, Russia, the European Union, and the United States. While Vietnam distances itself from directly supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression, it is already funding humanitarian projects aimed at addressing the consequences of the war. Vietnam experienced 3 major wars in the second half of the 20th century. The conflict with China in 1978 did not result in significant losses. After the anti-colonial war against France, which lasted from 1946 to 1954, the country was divided into 2 parts, the Communist North and the anti-Communist South. This division sparked another war, with the North supported by China and the Soviet Union, and the South backed by the United States. After the North's victory in 1975, Vietnam was united under the leadership of the Communist Party, which continues to govern today. Until 1986, Vietnam attempted to replicate the Soviet economic model, inefficient and non-market-based. However, from 1986 onwards, reforms introduced a partially market-oriented economy under communist leadership. This led to Vietnam's reintegration into the global economy. The government encouraged private ownership in agriculture and industry, but retained control over strategic sectors. Meanwhile, deregulation and foreign investment were promoted in the private sector. Oil production and the export of industrial goods to developed countries grew rapidly. Land reform provided a major boost to the agricultural sector. Today, Vietnam is the second largest rice exporter and the leading coffee exporter in the world. The development of aquaculture has helped achieve fish and seafood production of over 9 million tons per year. In 2000, a bilateral trade agreement between the United States and Vietnam was signed, significantly accelerating export growth. The production of electronic goods is rapidly increasing, with its share in exports reaching nearly 40%. Vietnam has been at war for 28 of the last 78 years. However, this has not prevented the country from rapidly rebuilding its economy after implementing substantial reforms and cooperating with developed democracies. The situation could have been even better if not for the interference of communist ideology and the associated corruption. South Korea is a developed economy. It is also steadily increasing its arms exports and strengthening its own military. The country closely cooperates with the United States, including supporting sanctions against Russia due to the invasion of Russian forces into Ukraine. The Republic of Korea has so far provided extensive humanitarian aid and other support to Ukraine. South Korea, or officially the Republic of Korea, was formed after the country was divided into North and South. This occurred as a result of the war initiated by Communist Beijing and Moscow in 1950. The war lasted for 3 years, and South Korea was saved from being occupied by Kim Il-sung only thanks to the UN forces, in which the US military played a key role. However, South Korea suffered enormous human and economic losses. South Korea's recovery began in the 1950s under very unfavorable conditions. First, prior to the war and the division into 2 states, the majority of Korea's industrial potential was concentrated in the north, around 80%, while the south was underdeveloped. Second, the south suffered the most severe devastation due to the war. Third, the country was politically unstable, a situation that was ended by the military coup of 16th May 1961, led by General Park Chung-hee. The key factors in the recovery were the pragmatic policies of Park Chung-hee's dictatorial regime and a strong recovery program supported by the United States and Japan. The U.S. acted within the framework of the Mutual Defense Treaty, signed in 1953, which began to significantly impact the economy in the early 1960s. The Treaty on Basic Relations between Japan and the Republic of Korea was signed in 1965. As a result of the economic boom, South Korea showed record GDP growth rates. The miracle on the Han River refers to the period of rapid economic growth in South Korea, driven by aggressive industrial and energy development. This was supported by strong government backing of exports, as well as foreign investment and external financing. However, the engines of growth were the chaebols, massive private corporations like Samsung, LG, and Hyundai, which received direct government support. South Korea faced dreadful starting conditions and massive destruction from the war, but ultimately became the 13th largest economy in the world. Hard work and external support demonstrate that war is not an obstacle to future success. Croatia has taken a clear stance on Russia's invasion of Ukraine and provides significant support to Ukraine. This includes sharing its experience and equipment for humanitarian demining, a skill the country developed due to the war on its own territory. Croatia declared its independence in 1991. However, the Yugoslav People's Army, representing Belgrade's interests, invaded almost immediately. Due to the fighting, hundreds of thousands of Croatians became displaced. Ukraine is not the first European country to face the challenge of temporarily occupied territories. The war ended with Croatia's victory in late 1995. The swift and unexpected operations Flash and Storm in early May and August 1995 played a key role in expelling the Serbian occupiers, offering hope that Ukraine can also drive out Russian invaders. Around 2 million mines of various types were planted across the country. The situation was worsened by the fact that most of the mines were laid without proper planning, making the demining process take nearly 15 years. The war also left many people in need of social support. A significant portion of the budget was used to manage external debt, with 60% of this debt inherited from the former Yugoslavia. Franjo Tuđman's rule ended in 1999, but the country suffered from high levels of corruption afterwards. In 2000, Croatia became a member of the World Trade Organization, and in 2001, it signed the Stabilization and Association Agreement with the European Union. Between 2000 and 2008, the country experienced an economic boom, fueled by foreign investment. However, the global economic crisis of 2008 significantly worsened the situation. Rising unemployment and corruption scandals triggered a wave of anti-government protests in 2011. Since 2016, Croatia has experienced fairly rapid growth. The tourism sector makes up 20% of the country's GDP, but due to its seasonal nature, it remains a challenge. Therefore, the government is encouraging the development of the engineering and IT sectors. Croatia is also actively expanding its infrastructure to handle and transit liquefied natural gas and oil. Croatia once faced a difficult legacy, a fragmented industrial base, dependency on seasonal tourism, heavy external debt, and high corruption. However, through cooperation with the European Union and reforms, the country is building a strong, innovative economy. The Netherlands, a NATO and EU member, is a country with a highly developed economy. The nation felt the consequences of Russia's invasion of Ukraine as early as 2014, when a Russian missile shot down a plane carrying 298 people, 193 of whom were Dutch citizens. The Netherlands has shown strong support for Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression, with contributions estimated at 0.6% of its GDP through bilateral programs and 0.2% through joint EU programs. At the beginning of World War II, the Netherlands sought to maintain neutrality, as it had done during World War I. However, Hitler decided to invade the country in May 1940. The invasion began with a massive bombing of Rotterdam, which was the country's largest port and industrial hub. The historic center of Rotterdam was destroyed in a firestorm, killing over 1,200 people and leaving more than 85,000 homeless. From mid-1941, the occupiers began to enforce repressions, confiscating goods and valuables in the Netherlands. During the winter of 1944-45, the Nazis even seized food and fuel, leading to the so-called Hunger Winter. As the Nazi forces retreated, they destroyed port facilities, flooded dike-protected lands, and demolished industrial buildings and equipment. To alleviate post-war economic problems, the Dutch government encouraged emigration to address housing shortages, food scarcity, and high unemployment. As a result, around 3 million people left the country. The collapse of the Dutch colonial empire also exerted additional pressure on the political and economic situation. However, in 1959, large natural gas fields were discovered, which triggered an economic boom, though it also led to challenges in other industrial sectors. The Dutch government tackled economic problems with cautious tax policies and a focus on innovation. This led to the active use of digital technologies, the relocation of multinational corporations to the Netherlands, and the promotion of green technologies. The Netherlands serves as a remarkable example of overcoming long-term crises caused by the aftermath of war and the dissolution of its colonial empire. Through diligent work and rational economic policy, these problems were addressed more than effectively. Taiwan holds some of the largest foreign exchange reserves in the world. During World War II, the island was transformed into a naval and air base for Japan. As a result, all sectors of the island's economy and infrastructure suffered heavily due to Allied bombings. Taiwan actively supports Ukraine, even though there are no official diplomatic relations between the two nations. Taiwan has supplied not only humanitarian aid to Ukraine, but also military assistance, including drones. After World War II, China experienced a civil war between the Communists and the Kuomintang Party. With support from the Soviet Union, the Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, defeated the Kuomintang, whose leader was Chiang Kai-shek. The Kuomintang relocated to Taiwan. Since then, mainland China has regarded Taiwan as its territory. The United States saw Taiwan as a partner and a counterbalance to mainland China, which was allied with the Soviet Union. From 1950 to 1965, Taiwan received $3.9 billion in economic and military aid from the United States. This is equivalent to $43.7 billion in today's value. The Kuomintang established a strict dictatorship and forced the development of a market economy under the constant threat from China. Taiwan started by exporting toys, textiles, and food. It then transitioned to developing heavy industry. From the 1980s, state enterprises were privatized. In the 1990s, the rapid development of the electronics industry began. Taiwan became an Asian tiger, focusing heavily on exports. Opposition politicians began to emerge in Taiwan in the mid-1980s, and since 2000, they have participated in elections. Democratization strengthened the political system's capacity and helped Taiwan overcome the 2007 to 2009 financial crisis. the government pushed hard for innovation through the creation of science and industrial parks. Since 2020, Taiwan has become a global leader in microchip production, boosting its export capabilities and helping to offset the relocation of some industries to less developed countries. The state of Taiwan was born as a result of the Chinese Civil War. The starting conditions for economic development were dire. However, a determined industrial policy and systematic support from its key partner, the United States, created the economic miracle known as Taiwan. In 2024, Taiwan is set to surpass Japan in terms of GDP per capita. Slovenia, a former republic of Yugoslavia, has a developed economy but limited natural resources. Slovenia significantly supports Ukraine's fight for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Slovenian Prime Minister Robert Golob, during his speech at the United Nations General Assembly, stated that ignoring Russian aggression in Ukraine would pave the way for other aggressive regimes worldwide. In 1989, movements for independence began in Slovenia, almost simultaneously with neighboring Croatia. In December 1990, Slovenia held a referendum with 94.8% of votes in favor of independence. On 25 June 1991, Slovenia declared its sovereignty. However, the very next day, the Yugoslav People's Army, JNA, the army of the federal Yugoslav government, launched military operations in Slovenia. In Yugoslavia, alongside the army, there was also a well-established territorial defense system. The Slovenian Republic government controlled local territorial defense units and secretly armed them with anti-tank and anti-aircraft systems. This made resistance to the Yugoslav army units very effective. Ambushes and significant losses for the Yugoslav forces compelled Belgrade to agree to the Brioni Accords. Furthermore, Belgrade struggled to conduct wars in both Slovenia and Croatia simultaneously. Slovenia accounted for 1/5 of Yugoslavia's GDP and 1/3 of its exports, despite having only 1/11 of the population. The destruction caused by the War for Independence was relatively limited. However, the structure of Slovenia's economy did not meet the demands of global competition. As it prepared to join the EU, Slovenia negotiated significant concessions on the pace of market liberalization, notably retaining its independent banking system. Soon after joining the EU in 2004 and adopting the euro in 2007, the country faced a severe shock due to the global economic crisis of 2007 to 2009, in stark contrast to the previous period of prosperity. Throughout its 33 years of independence, the government has worked persistently to reorient exports towards EU countries and external markets beyond the former Yugoslavia. This strategy has created a strong, innovation-driven export economy. Slovenia presents a remarkable example of growth through innovation and high-value-added industries. This success comes despite the heavy legacy of past wars and socialist rule. France is a highly developed post-industrial country, a member of the Nuclear Club, and ranks second in the European Union by economy size after Germany. The historical and cultural ties between France and Ukraine date back to the early Middle Ages. In the 11th century, French monarch Henry I married Anna Yaroslavna, daughter of Kiev Prince Yaroslav the Wise, who after his death became the first Queen Regent of France. These long-standing ties explain, in part, today's military assistance that France provides to Ukraine in its war against the Russian aggressor. France's industrial and economic backwardness on the eve of the Second World War led to its defeat in 1940 within 6 weeks, after which 2/3 of the country's territory was occupied, and the remaining part came under the control of the Vichy collaborationist regime, led by Marshal Pétain. And although French cities did not suffer as much as the cities of other European countries and the USSR, France's economic losses were significant. Its banking system, largest agricultural, industrial, and defense facilities fell under German control. After the Second World War, France received $2.5 billion in financial aid under the Marshall Plan, and the French government began implementing the first five-year plan of Jean Monnet's dirigisme policy, which involved active state intervention in the economy. On the 9th of May 1950, the historic Schuman Declaration was announced, uniting the steel, iron ore, and coal industries of France and West Germany. This resulted in the creation of the first organization based on the principles of supranational integration, the European Coal and Steel Community. Since then, 9th May has rightfully been celebrated as Europe Day, and Prime Minister Robert Schuman is considered a founding father of the European Union. The following 3 decades became a period of rapid economic growth for France, with the 1970s marking the start of the active development of nuclear energy. Today, France's GDP per capita is $43,780, which is 101% of the EU average, and the country's economy is among the top 10 in the world. From the first day of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, France has taken decisive action to support the Ukrainian people and the post-war recovery of Ukraine.